Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Nicole White. I am here with my beautiful, wonderful friend, Jen. She is an amazing astrologer, person, everything, entrepreneur, everything. I adore her. I'm adopting her as my younger sister. Uh, Jen,
Cool.
let me turn it over to you and tell us what we're going to chat about today or what you're going to share with us.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks for asking me to do this with you. And it feels like I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen with everybody. Can you see that, Nicole?
Perfect.
Cool. So it feels like such a ripe time for like talks and conversations about astrology. And I know like a lot of people have been asking me like, hey, Jen, what's going on? What's happening? Like what's alive right now astrologically? So I'm really glad that you asked me to do this. And there's a couple like really big things that we'll kind of name as we go through that are happening. I want to break it down as simply and as palatably for people as possible, because sometimes astrology is like it's so heady and I don't understand, and I hope that we can just really distill it down to some concrete meaning for us today.
Yeah.
And just briefly about me, like Nicole said, I'm an astrologer. I also incorporate counseling into a lot of my work and do astrological counseling and do readings with people, but also do really deep alchemical transformative work, of course, because that's what I love.
And Jen and I have done some trades, and she is phenomenal, wise beyond her years, so intuitive, so tapped in, so generous, so loving. Can't say enough about you.
Yeah, I mean, we've done some really sweet trades.
We have.
To see both of our gifts and take each other into deep places.
Yeah, it's a special place.
Yeah. So the first thing that I want to talk about is what's happening on Solstice, which is December 21st for us in the Northern Hemisphere when we return back to the light, which is very exciting. Because right now, right, the light is just getting less and less, and it's dark and inward and inward and inward. So let's just talk about what's happening on sidereal. But before I do that, I do want to talk about sidereal astrology, because I practice a little bit different kind of astrology than kind of normal traditional mainstream astrology. It's called sidereal. I think of it as the astrology of the future, because it really does track the progression and the movement of our solar system in really basic terms. Our solar system, the planet moves, the planets move throughout the sky, and we want to track for that movement and that progression. And tropical astrology, kind of more mainstream traditional astrology, doesn't account for that movement. So sidereal astrology is also what I call a real-time astrology, meaning that when you look up into the sky right now, you will see Jupiter and Saturn actually sitting in the constellation of Capricorn. Like if you took a telescope and looked up, you would be like, oh, there's the constellation of Capricorn, and I see Jupiter and Saturn sitting in the very early degrees of that constellation. So it's real time, like where the planets really are in the sky. So I hope, does that make sense, Nicole? Like when
The way I had gotten confused before, because I've always been told I'm a Sagittarian. And then when we did our reading, you're like, no, you're a Scorpio. So explain that. Why is it like, 29, 30 days opposite or behind what regular sun star astrology that we know of here?
Yeah. It's about 28 degrees different than tropical astrology. And it's really just because the sidereal system is accounting for the movement of the solar system. So it keeps changing very gradually, very slowly, right? Like 1 degree every 72 years, like very, very slow progression and change. But that's why it just keeps shifting more and more away from the tropical system. Sidereal astrology is similar, is the same as the Vedic system. So meaning that they both account for the progression of the planets, where tropical doesn't. So just something interesting. And sometimes people are like, what's, the meaning of sidereal and tropical astrology is the same. Like if you read a book about Mars and tropical astrology, it's going to mean the same as it does in sidereal, right? The only thing that's different is, like you said, what signs your planets end up being in, but the meaning is the same.
Mm.
So we don't have to necessarily go out and search for like books on sidereal astrology to be like, how do I understand this? Like, you can read any book on astrology that's tropically based and understand the sidereal system. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So according to you, we're not moving into the age of Aquarius, we're moving into the age of Capricorn?
We're not yet moved into the age of Aquarius.
Okay. But we
So
are headed there.
we are headed there. Tropical is just a bit ahead of where the
Ah.
sidereal system is.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Good question.
Hence it taking me from Sagittarius back into
Yes,
Scorpio.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
What I also just think that it's important to mention about sidereal astrology is that its roots are in the Vedic and the Mayan and the Syrian cultures. So it doesn't come out of this like white, patriarchal, Greek, Roman centered way of looking at astrology, which I actually really appreciate. So I feel like that's important to mention because it makes it a bit different, and it makes it the birthplace, like the ancestry of this type of astrology, a bit different.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing I want to say is, like, as an astrologer, what I think is almost the most important thing to look at in a chart, or when we're looking at transits, or is actually what the planets are doing together. So like, we're going to look at Jupiter and Saturn that are hanging out together in the sky. What's really important about that to me is not necessarily what sign they're in, but their relationship to one another. Meaning they're like as close as they've ever been. They're sitting super, super tight, close in the sky together. They're in relationship, they're conjunct, they're having this very alchemical dynamic together, which I think, and many other astrologers I think would agree, has a much stronger impact than being like, well, they're in Capricorn. It's like we actually want to look at their relationship together.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
And I do that with charts too. Like, I'll be like, oh, you're a moon Jupiter, as opposed to like your moon's in Aries and your Jupiter's in Sagittarius. It's like, well, let's look at their relationship together, because that doesn't change regardless of the system that you use. Just to say that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions about sidereal?
No, this is really good. I'm glad you did the slides too. So it helps me. I'm sure it'll help everyone else. If you're listening to this on audio, you can also find it on video. I'm turning most of these into podcasts as well. So you can, there'll be a link for the video as well. But this is great. I know we got some crazy times coming up. So excited to hear about it.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about Jupiter and Saturn. So for all of 2020, Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto have been hanging out together in the sky. They've been a stellium of 3 planets that are not often together in the sky. The last time they were together was in the early 80s, when the United States was going through the recession. There was a lot of economic upheaval, which of course we're seeing again now. But that was the last time they were together. So almost 40 years ago. And before that, it was much, much longer than 40 years. So it's a rare thing that's happening. But right now, and especially on solstice, Jupiter and Saturn are going to be the closest that they've ever been in 800 years. So much so that we're going to be able to see them, and you can see them now with the naked eye right before the sun sets. You'll see them on the horizon, shining really brightly, really brilliantly. And it's been 800 years since we've been able to see them like with the naked eye. Not 800 years since they've been conjunct, but 800 years since we'll be like, wow, there they are. I can see them. So on December 21st, they'll be like 0.1 degree apart. And to some of us, depending on where we are on the planet, it might look like they are one planet. And to some of us, we might be able to really distinguish the two of them. So it just kind of depends on where we're looking at them from. It depends on your perspective. And some are saying that this planetary conjunction, Jupiter and Saturn, was what was originally the Star of Bethlehem in the kind of mythology of Christianity and biblical tradition. I'm going to talk about that myth just as it relates to this in a minute, to just kind of lay a really simple foundation for it. But I've done a lot of research on it, and the Star of Bethlehem wasn't actually a star, just by the way, because stars are fixed and they don't move. It was most likely a combination of two planets together in the sky that the wise men were like, wow, that's amazing, look at that. And it was most likely not necessarily Jupiter and Saturn, but two planets that were very close to one another in the sky. Okay, and we're going to talk about the meaning of Jupiter and Saturn too, and then in a couple of slides. So just to I feel like the story and the myth and the archetype of the three wise men and that story is very relevant to us, and it's asking and invoking some questions in us in this present time that are very relevant. So if you're not familiar with the story of the three wise men, I mean, I grew up very, very Christian, and I still had to be like, wait, what's the story? What happened? What did they do? So the three wise men were most likely astrologers, by the way, which is why they were wise men, because they really had this capacity of, looking into the future or predicting of events, which is not what I do with astrology, by the way. But back in those times, it was really used in that way. And they were waiting for this new king to be born. They were awaiting the right alignment of astrological events to be like, okay, the new king is being born. It's now time. We're going to go in search of this king and make this long journey to greet and meet this newborn king, which we've come to say has been Jesus, right? So it's said that the three wise men, they looked to this star in the east, right? It's in one of the Christmas carols, right? Like,
that's what I keep thinking. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but you're reminding me of a Christmas song.
Yeah, it's like inundated in our culture in the Christmas songs. Like they saw a star shining in the east, and then they knew that that was the sign that said it's time to go find the new king. Which is then they made their pilgrimage down to Bethlehem, and they found Jesus in the manger, and they proclaimed him the new king, the Messiah. As the story goes, as the myth goes. Okay. So what's really cool is that the star in the east has very significant astrological meaning. It's called a heliacal rising, which just means that they were seeing two planets rise in the east as the sun was rising. That's what they were seeing, and that was what dictated, now is a potent time astrologically, let's move, like something new is being born, it's time, the time is here. Okay, so how I just want to relate it to what's happening for us today, like these archetypal myths are always currents that are really informing us, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. And they run through our culture and our society, whether we're aware of them or not, right? Like you could hear the remnants of that song. And you're like, what's that song? Like, I've heard it. Like, what is it? We're kind of swimming in these archetypal waters, whether we're really aware of it or not. And I grew up really believing the truth of this myth as real and true and factual. And I have really come now, of course, to view it as a myth and a story that can actually serve us, serve a purpose. So if the three wise men were really searching for a new king, a new ruler, there's like this search of a new life. Like what new thing is going to come in that's going to bring hope to us? Like where can we find hope in the midst of this ancient old story, right? We want a baby, which is so symbolic of hope, right? And new birth, new life. So I just want to pose like a couple of questions to us as we're in this like super turbulent time in our world of like, yes, in the United States, we've actually adopted a new king, a new president. But I think the deeper question is like, how do we, like, who's ruling our psyche? Who's ruling our inner world? Who do we put in charge? Who do we look to in ourselves? And how also are we finding hope and cultivating hope within ourselves? Because we're going to talk about Jupiter and Saturn as both being hope and in finding an authority in our internal worlds and in our internal lives that are really going to serve us right now. Okay. So back to Jupiter and Saturn, right? This myth is really underlying kind of the qualities of Jupiter and Saturn that are happening. Remember, they're sitting as close as they've ever been in the sky together. And Jupiter and Saturn are really old friends. They're buddies. They're like hanging out in the sky together. And they hang out together about every 20 years. They come into this cycle together, into this relationship together. But again, like not in this way where we can actually visibly see them in the sky. So again, we have this like Star of Bethlehem kind of constellation thing that's happening of like, wow, now is the time, something new is being born. So Jupiter, if you don't know much about the planet or, you know, the typical meaning of Jupiter, it really can be a planet of hope. It really can bless us wherever it is in our chart and wherever it's transiting in our sky. It really does offer us this sense of relief and hope and like, okay, there is light at the end of this tunnel. Like there is something to hope for. But when it's paired with Saturn, Saturn brings in this piece of reality that grounds us, saying like, this is not a naive and innocent hope that we might have when we were like 10, right? Like, it's not like a little kid hope where you're like, one day I will be, you know, it's not necessarily that. It's grounded in this experience that we've all had of trekking through the hard things, of trekking through the muck. You mean like, I've actually lived through some shit and it's been hard and it's not been easy. And the hope that I have now, the vision that I now have is actually really grounded in reality. It's actually really rooted in real-time experience. So that's a really important distinguishing factor. It's not this like illusory, you know, fantastical hope. It's a hope, it's more of a mature hope.
Okay. I like that.
So I think there's a lot of people right now who like feel no hope at all, who feel like a complete loss of hope, who feel totally deflated and defeated. Maybe like dreams haven't come true. Maybe like, hey, actually, I feel like I can't have everything that I want. And it's a lot harder than I think it is. And that sucks. Like there's this like harsh dose of reality that kind of gets spun into this a bit. And sometimes that's Saturn like dampening the hope and being like, God, there is no hope and it's all heavy and it's all hard. It's more of like the shadow side of Saturn, which can happen. But really the medicine and the gift and the quest of Saturn that it really calls forward from us is to say like, Saturn provides us limitations and structure. And we're like, oh, okay, the limitations are now clear. And now I can make choices based on the limitations that I understand and know. And I actually have some structure to work with, which sometimes is really helpful, where we're like, I don't have all the options in the world available to me, but I have a few, I have a couple. And within those limitations, right, maybe that word has some negative connotation to it, but within those limitations, we can feel an ability to expand or to have some freedom or relief even of like, okay, but this is actually what I'm working with, right? Like this feels a bit more doable and a bit more manageable. How does all that sound, Nicole?
Yeah, no, you're a brilliant storyteller. I'm just taking it in. So I think if there's questions, they'll probably come at the end when you bring it all together. But it's so true. I mean, I know from my past, dark past, to come in, to be optimistic, to try to see the good. And what you're saying is so true. There are times, even yesterday, where it's like, gosh, you know, am I just a delusional Pollyanna? Because things feel really freaking hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in alignment with what you're saying. Like my mind now knows, okay, don't glom onto that. But there is this literal pull, you know, almost towards this darkness where I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to go back there ever again.
Yes. And I love that you brought that up because you're making it really personal. And it's like, depending on where Jupiter and Saturn sits in your chart, right? It's like, this is going to impact all of us very individually.
Yeah.
You may have more of like a Saturn resonance in your chart, right? You'd be like, wait, but I feel the heavy more easily, or somebody else might have more of a Jupiter resonance and be like, I'm always hopeful no matter what, and everything's amazing. And it's like, well, that's not really realistic either, right? It's like,
well, I've always resonated with Jupiter because as a Sagittarius, I was told Jupiter is there. And I always saw it like a happy little dog with the lucky tag, right? And so even if like hard stuff happened to me, I always had this sense like, okay, no, there's something lucky in my life that I can, that always kind of pulls me out. Sometimes it's the last minute, sometimes it's with plenty of time out of like crazy situations. So, you know, I feel like a very loving relationship to Jupiter. And again, that like lucky dog kind of essence to it. And then Saturn is very much like, you know, like even like with his ring, you know, I feel the spiraling of it and just this density. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's my relationships with it that I feel.
I love how you're bringing in your personal relationship to them, because it's so important. Like, I can also be like, Saturn means this and Jupiter means this. And also at the end of, like, that's useful and helpful, but also at the end of the day, it's about your personal relationship with them. Right. And like Saturn feels like dense and thick, and Jupiter feels like the dog with the lucky collar, like beautiful. And I think that's so much about what astrology is like building this personal relationship with the planets like you just described is so crucial. Like, great, Saturn feels dense to you and Jupiter feels lucky, like beautiful, you know, like these are how we make the meanings personal and build relationship with the planets ourselves.
Yeah.
Really sweet. Thanks for bringing that in. Okay. So let's talk about, well, this may not be relevant when people listen to this, but I just wanted to mention that, what date is it? Was it yesterday? No, 2 days ago.
Yeah, Monday.
2 days ago was the new moon in Scorpio, in Sidereal Astrology,
right,
by the way. So I think in tropical, it was in Sag.
What?
Yeah. And by the way, like, you can find resonance in both systems, right? So it's like, what hit you?
Yeah. When I have a reading done where I'm a Sagittarius, I resonate. But oh my gosh, my reading with you where I'm the Scorpio, it kind of almost brought in this other side of me that's been stuffed away. So there is a resonance with both. I think sometimes it is confusing because it's like, am I this or am I that?
Yeah.
But what I really got out of you in your reading is it's really about what you resonate with. And bigger than the names of it, right? Like in so many things in our life, you know, you're more than whatever label a doctor has put on you. We were talking about our eyes before we started recording. We're bigger, we're more than the label.
Yes.
The name.
Yes. So much so. And I think we can get stuck in those astrological boxes, right? Of like, I am a sun in Scorpio and it means this, and I must operate in this way. And it's like, no, wait, come back. Like, astrology is one tool out of millions that we can find meaning, find clarity, find like reassurance in. And it happens to be a tool that I'm just like, I love, and I'm like nerd out on it. But there's so many tools that we can use to find meaning and understanding. So yes.
Right. And I also love this because, and a lot of the conversations have been about the duality that's happening now. And I think that when, you know, I loved your little robot thing. You know, when we get out of robot and like, this is how it is, it's in the box and it has to stay in the box. And when we allow ourselves to even be in this like unknown, whoa, I'm floating in water, it meant this thing once and now it means this other thing. I don't know about you, but I think it helps us come into our own to figure out what it really means for ourselves instead of this constant outside source that we're like, oh, tell me who I am.
Oh my God, yes.
With that?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think when I first found astrology, I was really young. I was like 13, and I was really hungry for like, somebody please tell me who I am. Like, because I have no, no foundation, no roots of like knowing who I am, other than giving my power away, giving my authority away to teachers, to priests, to parents, to whoever, right? But somebody please like friggin' tell me who I am. So I think originally it served this like grounded place for me to be like, oh, thank God. Like, okay, I'm a sun conjunct Mars, and that means this, and blah, 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 right? But as you grow into knowing yourself, I think then it becomes, for me, then it becomes more of like a tool and just a touch point, and like, hey, does this resonate or not? Always checking it back against that internal system of really autonomy and authority in yourself.
Right. Right. And that's what I think a good healer like you and Heather, and I think I fall into that sometimes as well, where we're helping someone with the information they're seeking, but not this authority figure like, I now know you, I have figured you out, and now you must do this. But it's giving these gifts to where a person can take them in and go, oh, okay, well, today I'm this, and today I'm that, and I can be all of this. And to empower people back, right? Be like, no, 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 you know who you are, right? And great teachers will help propel you towards who you are, not be and no offense, not be the guru that you have to follow in order to reach the enlightenment the guru says.
Oh, yes, please. I love that you're bringing that in. I love it so much, and it's so near and dear to my heart. And that's why
I fell into that many times. Oh, I'll just follow this modality. That's I'll find myself in it, or oh no, this. And honestly, I had a yoga teacher who said it's kind of, which resonates with what we're doing. It's like the starship Voyager. Like you go up, you get propelled around a planet, but then that helps propel you to go around the next. And you don't want to keep circling the same teacher, the same teachings, right? The same dogma. Like we need to grow, we need to expand, we need to be like, oh, wait, this is a nice safe bubble. Oh shit, here I go into the unknown again.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. Not circling the same like orbit over and over again. Yeah, I love that. And that's why I feel like in order to be a really potent astrologer, we have to bring in the counseling piece.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be fortune tellers, and we don't want to be these people who say this is what's going to happen to you and this is how it's going to impact you. That's really misusing astrology. And for me, it's exactly what you said. We have to learn to see the person in front of us before we let their chart dictate who they are. And we have to witness them and feel them and be in the space with them and let the space unfold with them, and really let go of that I have the authority and I have the answers as your astrologer, and really turn the session back towards the person and inviting them to come into who they are, and really also trusting most deeply that their psyche, that their unconscious knows the way 100%.
Exactly. And my session with you was so different than other astrology readings I've had, because the other ones are, you're this, you're this, this is going to, and it's very much like, okay, I'm going to tell you who you are. And with you, it was very much, and I still remember the session and what came out of it. You were literally like giving me just enough information. And then it was like this beautiful massage and dance. And then, and you were like asking me questions and what resonated, and like what really pulled out with, for me, this just very childlike, freeing, creative, liberating young being that got lost along the journey of being an adult. And so, yeah, what you do is so brilliant and so unique, because you are bringing that coaching into it, and even more so the empowerment, right? You're empowering people to take this information of their astrology, but how does it resonate in their life, and where do they want to take it, right?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I could talk about that with you for forever.
I know we can,
and it's such a deep it's such a rich place. And I'm very passionate about it. I'm happy. I'm so glad you brought it in.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I just wanted to mention like just the new moon in Scorpio, because we're in like this, sometimes I feel like the new moon is this new cycle that we get to explore for the month or for 30 days, or we get to watch as the moon moves through its phases, right? Like as it goes quarter, full, blah, 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 on and on. But this new moon in Scorpio that's kind of setting the stage for the next 30 days, really it sets the stage for, as we go through solstice, as we go through the new year, as we go through this time of coming back towards the light, it invokes these questions. And you're actually a pro in this realm and the way that I see it, because you have this Scorpio archetype, Nicole, that you live inside of every day, of what are we letting go of? What are we letting die away? What skins are we shedding? How are we transforming, right? Like, how are we alchemizing and bringing the gold up to the surface? Because we're not just doing this mucky work for the sake of being in it. We're actually alchemizing. We're actually transforming something in this scorpionic archetype. And it's going to be incredibly beautiful when it comes into its form, because it's been through that underworld. It's been worked. It's been through the sludge.
Yeah.
So, sometimes that new moon in Scorpio, it's not the most pleasant time. It has an intensity to it, right? Which I know it may be hard for us to distinguish this from like the whole of 2020. It's just had this intensity because Pluto has been so heavily involved in what's going on. And Pluto is the planet of Scorpio, right? Pluto is the planet of alchemy and working us and working our shadows and working the unconscious and working everything in the underworld. And we've all been going through that. Yeah. Let alone if you have a Scorpio sun or a lot of Scorpio in your chart or a strong Pluto, like it's just more and more intense for sure. So it's uncomfortable, right? And I've had clients write me and they'd be like, hey, Jen, how do I find peace? And how do I get out of the uncomfort? And how do I I'm like, well, you really don't. We all are in it. And some of us in it more than others, depending on what's happening. But there's really no getting past the underworld portion, right? There's no escaping it or bypassing it. And it's not that we have to stay in the underworld and be in our trauma, but we do have to cycle through it sometimes. And this happens to be, I think, one of those cycles as we are just with the energy of that new moon and what it's kind of gifting us with.
Yeah. And that is an important key, right? We are going through this darkness, literally. Literally. Dark night of the soul, some people would call it, the underworld, Pluto, this shadow side. And it's unfortunate that the news is not actually covering what's really going on, where a lot of people are deciding to leave the planet at this time. And so what would you share with people? In my personal experience, it like you said, it's a cycle. We're gonna move through it. And I could talk forever, but I want you to share, how can we give people that hope that we're gonna move through this, who are really on this edge? Because I know there's so many people who are not coming up front, and this is a topic people aren't talking about. And of course it's not pretty, but it's so hard to lose someone when they've decided to take their own life. And I've been in, early March, April. It's hard for me to admit, but I was like, I don't know about this anymore. I just don't know. And I sat with it. And some days it was like, okay, tomorrow morning I have to get up and feed the dog and the cat. That's what I'm going to live for today.
Yeah.
And then to move through it, I had all this why am I so happy when the world's falling apart? Because I moved through that cycle, and it is a cycle. So what would, some guidance for folks who are really feeling this I don't know if I want to keep doing this life thing?
I think, so many things come up as you tell your story and say it, but the first thing is I just want to honor and validate, it's okay to feel that way. Like, it's all right. It's all right to feel like you're unsure about continuing, that you're unsure about if you want to be here or not. It's okay to feel that. And I think there's often so much, right, shame around it, and like, oh fuck, I don't want to admit this, and that I just want to like really humanize it and like be like, it's, those thoughts are really okay, and especially right now.
Yeah.
And I love how you said about the cycle. Like, everything in this world is a cycle. And when we're in that place of the darkness, the depression, the despair, it doesn't feel like a cycle. It feels like it will be forever and it will never end. And it is really important, even if you only intellectually remember that it's a cycle, maybe you don't believe it or feel it, but you just like, you read a sticky note and you're like, it's all a cycle. And you're like, well, fuck that, maybe. But, you know, but at least you intellectually know on some level. And I also think that when we are in that place, and I know some of us dip into it more than others, depending on who we are and what our tendencies are. But when we do, I think it's really important, like you said, to take all the pressure off yourself to do anything. The focus becomes very basic and very simple, and that's really crucial in moving through this cycle. It's actually a really key element of like, today I took a shower. Today I laid on the grass. Today I read a book. Like, it is not the time for productivity. It is not the time for getting things done. It's not the time for like self-comparison. It's time for deep, simplistic, step-by-step, just little things, or little, I don't even want to use the word self-care because people who are in that place are like, barf, I hate self-care. But just little moments of like, what can you do that just even feels like tiny, tiny micro movement? Because it will start to shift the energy. It will start to move something in you, whether you're conscious of it or not.
Beautifully said. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I've brought that up a lot because, you know, I think that if I felt it back in the beginning, and again, we're not hearing about people's struggles outside of the mainstream, you know, what they're showing with Rona and numbers and stuff like that. And I'm not, you know, putting that aside, but I think it needs to be said, and we're seeing that in the astrology. We're going through this dark cycle, and again, I know that there's just so many people who aren't talking about it, right? Because it's just so taboo. You just don't, because you're labeled a certain way and this and that. And honestly, I think what I'm hoping with, you know, moving through all this is that we become more real with one another about the real topics, instead of this surface, oh hey, how are you? Okay, I'm good. Yeah, great. Okay, see you later. Right?
Yes.
And
Well
you and I
said.
are like that, which is why we connect. It's like, small talk, whatever. Let's get to the juicy stuff, because you don't get that with a lot of people. Not a lot of people can hold that space for one another, which is why, you know, I value our friendship so much. We can go there.
Yeah,
And
totally.
it doesn't mean we have to take care of one another. It just means we can open up a conversation and have it and feel it. And
Oh yeah, it's so satisfying.
yeah.
So that sun in Scorpio loves that depth.
Good to know.
Yeah, and I just wanted, like, I just wrote a paper on this for grad school about the impact of coronavirus on mental health and on our emotional health, and how, like, just like you said, it's not being looked at, it's not being considered. Some, you know, I found some articles on it when I was like researching, and people were like, yeah, we are going to face like a massive, and we are a massive mental health crisis that's going to take years and years and years and years to tend to the way that people are experiencing this pandemic, the way that they're experiencing this isolation, the trauma that certain people are really, it is labeled as trauma depending on how we experience it, that people are in the midst of, and how we recover from that, and how therapists, counselors, social workers are needing to be very, very aware of that and responding to that, and on a collective level, it's having a massive, massive impact.
Yeah.
So I want to really, yeah, just second what you said and about the realness of it and the reality of it, and that there are some people that are starting to write about it. And like you said, it's not in the mainstream awareness, but it is a very real pandemic that we are also facing.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I would share with people is feel your freaking feelings.
Mm,
Like
mm,
feel them, write them. I mean, there's been so many days this year
mm,
where I just start to cry, and it's okay,
mm,
because when I allow myself to cry, and I mean big, big
mm,
cries, 30-minute, hour-long cries where all this stuff is bubbling up to the surface.
mm,
The amazing thing is we try to push that off.
mm,
But the amazing thing, just like a child that throws a fit, when
mm.
they're done, they feel fine. When I let myself have that huge cry and those huge feelings, when I'm through the other side of it, it's like, all right, what now? You know? And
Totally.
when I push it down, then
Mm,
it's days
mhm,
and weeks and months of it not going away because I haven't
mm,
faced it.
mm. Right. I love that. And I think it's so true. Like we often fear the actual cry or the actual feeling of it more than, so we're just like so afraid of that we won't do it. But actually, I think as we grow into adulthood, all of us, I think, have some sort of touch point with having a big cry and then feeling a release afterwards. Of like, wait, okay, I am starting to make that correlation that if I don't avoid it, and if I do feel it, it's actually a bit less scary. And I do feel better afterward, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's just a little release. It's like,
Right.
okay, or my body has released something, right? When you're doing those heaving like cries, your body is so releasing. And the
It's
tears
a
are that
detox.
release really coming to the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of that thing, that old cliche saying, what you resist persists. But it's true. If we just, okay, I'm going to resist looking at that bill, it's not going to go away. Eventually, we're going to have to deal with it. I'm going to resist that email. Well, eventually, you got to deal with that person. Same
Mm,
thing with our feelings.
mm,
We
mm,
got it. I hope that what we get through a lot of this is like, okay, I'm a real human being with real feelings, and I don't have to put on a front face all the time and be fake, fake, nice, nice.
mm. Yeah.
I
Oh
think that
God.
hurts us. I think it's creating so much illness that people don't even realize, is that you're just, this holding, this like tightness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just want to say, like, there's a lot of maybe you and I can talk about this more too, and I can hook you up with this, but there's a lot of people offering free resources right now,
Hmm.
like mental health stuff, emotional stuff, because people are aware that people are really isolated and going through it. And so maybe we could like compile a resource list and just, here's free shit that you can listen to and do and
Yeah.
engage with when you feel like, hey, I'm not quite ready yet to talk about it, or I'm feeling shame, or I don't want to get a therapist, or whatever it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
here's a whole bunch of free stuff that you can do or not do, but here it is.
I think we should absolutely do that. And that would be such a gift for folks to just even have some sources that are talking about it and leading to other sources.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
you and I were very much, we just flow with all these different conversations, which I love and I was afraid of because of our time. So I'm going to zip it and let you finish your presentation.
We're actually we're doing so good. We only
Oh,
have one more
okay.
slide. Yeah, we're doing awesome.
Okay.
But I feel like this is really potent, a way to end too. And so in sidereal astrology, Pluto, which is, the outermost planet, so it takes the longest to move through signs, right? And we Pluto takes 200, almost 250 years to circle our birth chart. So we never see its full circle in our lifetime, right? We get through about 3 or 4, constellations in our lifetime if we live to be into our 90s. So it's a long it's a long transits of Pluto. So when Pluto changes a sign, it's really significant. It's like, whoa, okay, this long transit is coming to an end and it's moving into something new. So in January, in a couple weeks here, Pluto is moving into Capricorn. And again, this is for Sidereal Astrology. So it's going to be in Capricorn for like 20 years. This is a very long cycle. So until 2040. So it's again, it's significant. So when Pluto just basically is, again, it rules Scorpio, right? It rules the underworld. It rules trauma. It rules transformation. It rules alchemy. It rules change. And it also rules volcanoes on a side note. So it likes to erupt things. It likes to bring things to the surface, right? It likes to bring the unconscious to the conscious. So as it moves into Capricorn, Capricorn's all about authority, structures, the government, finances, right? Systems of economy, systems of social structure, all of these things. So as Pluto, you can maybe start to imagine how these two are going to work together. Like Pluto moves into Capricorn, this uprising against authority, becoming independent of government control, really talking a lot about power. Who's got power? Who doesn't have power? How do we take power back? Who, like all these questions around power start to come into play when we see Pluto in Capricorn, and really questioning all societal structures. Like, does this structure work? Does this government work? Does this model work? Like, those are all really, really appropriate questions for the time as right now. And, you know, Capricorn's not necessarily like a quick moving sign. It's not like Aries or Aquarius or Gemini that might be a bit faster, but it's also this like change can come a bit more gradually or progressive. But when it does come, it makes it all the more powerful. It makes it all the more rooted. It's like, wow, this is actually like a rolling earthquake of a change, not just like a quick burst of change. This is a change that's going to last for a long time and probably change, as we know and as we see, change the course of humanity as a whole. So that's a very profound thing that's also happening.
Wow. So sum up the solstice for us. Like what would be beneficial for us to do to like, you know, do we need to journal? Do we need to meditate? Like, I feel it's a very inward process, right? Which we're all being forced to do with what's going on anyways. So in your opinion, how do you think most of us would really most benefit from all of this that's going on?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always a big fan of journaling. I'm like a journaling nerd, but some people aren't, you know, some people it's not their thing and that's totally fine. But I think like reflecting on or feeling into what you've come through in the last year and acknowledging the realness of it, acknowledging whatever it's been for you. And I'm not saying everyone's experience has to be like hard and terrible. Some people are like, I'm having a good time and I feel terrible about that, right? Like that's fine too. We can have shame on both sides of that equation. So like acknowledging the reality of what your experience has been, be like, okay, like, wow, I've come through that. I've been through that and it's changed me or formed me in this way. And what is this like, what is this new hope? What is this new birth? Like if we go back to the myth of the three wise men, like they saw the star in the east, which could have been Jupiter and Saturn, could have been Jupiter and Venus, a couple of variations, but they saw that star in the east as we're going to see on solstice and as we can already see right now. And we're making this quest, we're making this journey to the new life. And what is that journey? What is that new life? What are you seeking? What are you questing for? That's a very Jupiterian question. And how will the structure and the reality of your life also inform that quest? So whether you want to like sit with those questions or write about those questions or dream about those questions or talk about those questions with somebody, like all are super amazing and relevant, or just listen to this and do nothing else. Like that's great too. But I would just propose those questions as like our intentions moving forward from solstice and moving into the new year. And there is hope. And I think it's so interesting that this myth, this story also comes in for us. And we can we can resonate with the myth or not, and there's probably 1,000 other myths that I don't even know about. And I'm a big fan of myth because I think it informs the way that we can create our own story and our own life. And we can learn things from the myth, or we can identify with different characters, or all of those things. But that's what I would propose.
I love it. I love it. And I'm going to be mindful of your time. I could honestly keep you on forever. Tell us what you're doing right now, how to get a hold of you, what you're offering.
Yeah. So I'll just go back to this because it has my info on it. You can find my website is just my name, jenantill.com. You can follow me on Instagram at jenleeantill. I'm not really on Facebook anymore. I just hate that platform. So that's where you can find me. And I think the most relevant thing that I'm offering is I'll be starting to teach astrology and starting to teach the astrological counseling in February. And so if you want to be a part of that, definitely like go to my website and sign up to be on my email list, because you'll be notified of that. That's the biggest thing that's happening. I'm going to start to teach people to do what I do. It's not only to learn to read charts, but it's also what Nicole and I were talking about in terms of learning to be a witness, a radical witness, which is what I'm calling it, about learning to hold the space, learning how to engage with empathy, how to engage with boundaries, how to invite clients to their own power within the session. That's going to be a huge part of the course, which really, like we were talking about, hardly any other astrologers work in that way. So it will very much set people apart in the field. And I'm going to be starting that course in February. So that's probably the biggest new thing that I'm offering.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. But of course you can get readings and all of that fun stuff too on my website. And my one-on-one work with people is full right now, but I'll be taking new clients in April. So that's all on my website.
Okay. Great. Great. Jen, thank you so much for spending this time with me and sharing all of your gifts. I love you so much, and I can't wait for us to do it again. So we will definitely schedule more if you're open for it.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you're my favorite place in the world, Sedona. I'll get there. I'll get there. I'll get there.
You were here not long ago in my kitchen.
I know. Just a few months ago. It was so good. It was so great.
Yeah.
So sweet, but so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I love you so much. Thank you for your time. And I'll see you soon. Congratulations. And you and Heather are having your engagement party coming up on the solstice. How
on the solstice. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So, I love it. I love it. All right. We will chat more for sure.
All right. We will. Yes. Love you.
Big hug to my friend. All right.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye.